Hey everyone, welcome to Cuberviews, episode 37. This is your host, Ian Braverman. I hope you're having a spectacular day. Today I am joined by Tim Meyers. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Ian?
I'm doing great. I'm always excited to talk about Cube. It's what I'm here for, it's what I live for.
I'm very excited to talk with you as well.
Awesome. And yeah, you are the winner of CubeCon 2023. So a very good Magic player, in addition to being a very prolific cube designer, which I would say is a cube that we're going to be talking about today, the Changeling Cube, that I think has inspired a lot of people, inspired me to build my own cube, which we're going to talk about. But yeah, how's it going today? How's everything doing?
Good. It's been a busy week for me, busy with work, so I haven't been able to cube in real life as much as I would like, but this is a great outlet for me as well. Catch up on some time spent thinking about Magic.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And how often do you play Magic? Like, do you compete in addition to being a cube designer?
I try to do weekly drafts with a local play group for cubes. Outside of that, I'm not really much into limited anymore. For a long time, limited was the main way I engaged with Magic, just kind of casual F&M drafts at a local game store. But now it's mostly just cube, and that's I think a big improvement.
Same. I just did a pre-release, the Final Fantasy pre-release, and it was such a fun set. I love doing like a set once or twice when it comes out, exploring the new environment of the set, trying out new cards that can go into cubes. I thought Final Fantasy was great. I've already added a bunch of cards to my cubes for it.
With the influx of new sets, I've been able to kind of be more choosy. So I went hard on Trakir Dragonstorm, but I think Final Fantasy might be what I'm personally sitting out at least.
Oh, Tarkir Dragonstorm is great too. Like, honestly, that was a big inspiration for me building my own Changeling Cube because it had the common cards that cared about if you had a dragon in play or your hand, like Dispelling Exhale, that if you behold a dragon, you can counterspell unless they pay two, or if you have a dragon, counter unless they pay four. That whole cycle was like a big reason that I was like, wow, I really want to build a Changeling Cube now.
That's one of the great things about kind of rules modification cube like this is that any set can have a card that's going to be really, really impactful for you that kind of flies under the radar for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And so introduce yourself. Tell me about your history with Magic and Cube.
I started playing Magic in about 1999, I believe. I think Mercadian Masks was the first set that came out after I had started playing. My older brother got me into it, so the early years was mostly kind of kitchen table playing with them, my older brother and my younger brother. Eventually, I did get into a little bit of Type 2 at the time, or Standard as it is now known. Very casual, not net deck sort of things. I had a black-red zombie deck with Dedapult at one time that I was very proud of and liked to play, but it wasn't very good. I took a break around Mirrodin and then got back into the game around Shards of Alara or Conflicts. And that's when I learned about drafting. I got introduced to Magic Online, played a lot on that. I don't remember exactly when I got into Cube. I think my younger brother got me into Cube by introducing me to, I think, LSV draft videos and then playing a lot on Magic Online. I built the Cube with him. It was kind of a legacy sort of vibe cube. We had that at least before 2014, because I know that I got fetch lands for it before those were reprinted in Khans of Tarkir. As time went on, I started experimenting more into lower power cubes, though, and then eventually some more novel cubes.
Like this one. And speaking of Dedapult, I love Dedapult. It's one of my favorite cards in my Changeling Cube. Is it in yours?
It is not in this one. It's not on rate for the power level that I'm aiming for. The sacrifice outlets that I include in mine are supposed to be more kind of infinite combo oriented because that's the bent of what the cube is trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a funny card, sacking zombies. And tell me about some of your hobbies outside of Cuban Magic. What do you do for work and what are some of your hobbies?
So I work as a financial analyst at a corporation. So I'm putting together budgets, forecasts, some revenue reporting, inventory reporting, variance analysis, basically a lot of playing on spreadsheets and dashboard sort of thing. Outside of work and outside of Magic, well, Magic's the main hobby, and that can kind of expand to whatever space you allow for it. But whenever I'm feeling a little bit burnt out and dialing back on Magic, I'll have a rotating cast of other things like college football, sometimes games. I'll binge on TV shows, get really into finding new music or other projects.
Very nice. And so do you do a lot of Excel sheets with your cube design?
I have a few, yeah. I've dialed back a little bit on it, but before I had a little my own hypergeometric calculator template. I built a little dashboard with Power BI to do some analysis after the first KubeCon, but I've been a little bit more vibes based or a little bit loosey goosey with it as of late.
Cube Cobra has some really good analysis tools. I definitely use it a lot, like in my cube design. So for me, that's all the analysis I need. But that's really cool. You really dive into the spreadsheets and it makes sense, but also what you do for work. And today we're talking about the Changeling Cube, like we mentioned, which I haven't had a chance to play your version, but like I said, it inspired me to build my own because just the whole concept, it just sounded so fun. What was the inspiration for you to build it?
I was looking for cards for a lower powered cube of mine. It had a slight warrior sub theme. So I was doing a Scryfall search to see what other cards could work with that. And I came across Irration Foremost, which is one white for a 2/2 double strike. When it enters or attacks another target warrior creature you control gains double strike till end of turn. It reminded me of Silverblade Paladin,
Yep.
which can work with any creature. It just had a little bit cleaner of an implementation. And I saw that card and I was thinking, hey, that could probably be printed today without the warrior restriction. And then the light bulb hit that, oh, I could build a cube where that is the case. We're expanding the scope of a lot of these types of creatures. So that was the first inspiration, was coming across cards for a different cube and thinking about applying that to its own project. I'll note that I'm not the first one to do this. There are other Changeling cubes out there. There were before I started developing mine, and I did turn to them when I first had this idea to see, okay, what have people done in this space, get idea for cards. But I did come up with this idea just looking at cards, basically.
Really cool. I love when you're looking for cards for your cube and then you find some other card that totally inspires you to build something totally new. It doesn't quite fit into the one that you're building, but that's great. And speaking of that, how do you find cards to go into this cube? Do you like go on Scryfall and like look up random creature types and see what you find?
So that was what I started doing, was I just started searching for, oh, let's see all the cards that care about dragons, and let's see all the cards that care about goblins. There's actually an Oracle tag on Scryfall, OTAG, Kindred, and that will show you a list of all the different cards that care about creature types. I didn't find that out until a few months after
Oh,
I
I
had
need
started
that's good for
developing
me to
this.
know.
Yeah. I was posting on Reddit to say, here's my cube. What ideas or cards do you think would work well in here? And someone said, there's a Scryfall tag that does this for you. Like, okay, that is very helpful.
Yeah.
But I also just like looking through the cards that I have, looking through trade binders. Like Engineered Explosives is a card that's in here just because I saw it while I was flipping through someone's trade binder and saying that could fit here. It's not particularly involved in the theme of the cube, but it just fits mechanically with what I'm trying to do. I'll often just look at cards basically, and just have a constant filter in my head of what could possibly make sense in this type of cube.
I think that I must be one of the most annoying people to trade with because I just like ask people if I can look at their binder and I'll just like look at cards and be like, oh, this is perfect for my cube. And then they'll be like, you want to trade for it? I'm like, no, I just wanted to look for ideas.
I'll do the first part. I'll say, can I look through your binder? And they'll say, what are you looking for? I'll say, I don't know.
Yep.
I'll know it when I see it, though.
That's awesome. And looking at the Cube Cobra page, the outline for this, it says at the very top, right at the beginning, build something broken. What does that mean?
So the overview is something I've changed a lot over the years to try to figure out what's the best way of presenting information to the prospective players or to other designers. So leading off with build something broken, I want to kind of emphasize that this is a higher power level cube. There's going to be things that are not okay in other cubes. The rate that you're going to get certain effects is greatly reduced, but also that I'm trying to make you assemble something more than the sum of its parts. Like there's a lot of powerful cards in here, but ideally you're going to need to work with them somehow to enable them.
Yeah, tell me about the power level of this cube. That's something that I was actually really interested in because some cards I see them and they just scream to me like, wow, this becomes so powerful. Because one thing that's funny about Magic is sometimes they'll just print like a Lord or a really powerful effect that only specifically cares about one creature type. Like, for example, Magda, Brazen Outlaw. Dwarves have become more popular in recent years, but one a red, 2/1. Other dwarves you control get +1/+0. Whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, create a treasure, and then sacrifice 5 treasures. Just search your deck for an artifact or dragon and put it on the battlefield. That's just so sick in this queue. I mean, it's a lord. It makes you mana. then you can tutor your deck for any creature and put it into play. Like cards like that just become so turbocharged in this cube. It's awesome.
Yeah, Magda in particular is one that gets a lot of attention. It's one that readily jumps out as something that is just off the wall busted in here. It's on the upper end of an individual impact card that I'll allow in this cube, but I'm hesitant to cut it. I have been dialing back the power level over the years, I would say, in general. So this could be out the door eventually, but for now, I'm sticking with it.
Another card that looks so funny when I was looking at it is Katerin Summons, which is one black, search your deck for a mercenary, reveal it, and put in your hand. Like, if mercenaries were good, this card would be unbelievably broken. But in this
Y-
cube, it's literally demonic tutor for a creature for 1 mana. It's so good.
Yeah, so when I was first starting the cube and I was just kind of exploring the space of what's possible, I noticed that there would be room for a lot of kind of creature combos and a lot of things that kind of helped that happen. Cattern Summons was one of those cards that it's a tutor to help you assemble a specific interaction that you're trying to find. So powering up those sorts of cards is definitely something that I was trying to do building this cube. When I first looked to see what else people were doing in this space, there were some hints of that, but I wanted that to be the whole focus of this cube. So distilling it down to 360 cards, making that the focus has been something I've been working on.
And tell me about what the decks end up looking like. Are most decks combo decks? And do people even realize when they draft the cube that they built a combo deck? Or just because so many crazy interactions that were never supposed to work together because these strange niche lords or creature types were never meant to interact with each other?
There's definitely lots of discovery during both the draft and during gameplay. And that's something that has been a real joy in cultivating this cube. I like hearing stories of what people have discovered and what they found. And sometimes it will be something that I hadn't considered of a way that some of these cards interact together. The decks don't all have to be combo focused. There are some just traditional make creatures turn them sideways types of decks as well. And that's a kind of helpful thing because it's something for newer players to latch onto. So this is a very self-indulgent cube in that when I designed this, I didn't have a playgroup at the time. So I was only cubing with my younger brother. So the audience of this was a very niche, very invested and franchise player base, us two, who are going to be the designers of this cube, who would understand all the different interactions and all the different possibilities and why each card was in the cube, what they all would all work with. As I've been playing with more people, I have tried to broaden it out a little bit in terms of making things that newer players can latch onto. And I think that it has been successful in that new players have found something to latch onto, even if they are going to be overlooking some of the potential of their cards and some of the lines of play that are available to them.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, this cube definitely I could see being a cube that people could walk into and open up a pack and say, oh my gosh, what do I do? Especially if it was all completely focused on combo. So I totally agree that I always try and put some more obvious or newer player friendly decks in my cubes just so people have something to latch on to. And are there any cards in this cube that you purposely excluded because they would just become too powerful or not fun with the rules change? Like my version that I built of this cube, I built it to be a much lower power level. It's mostly a peasant cube version, a few rares, mostly built out of my bulk, like I said. Were there some cards that even in this higher power version just were totally broken and not acceptable?
Yeah, there's a whole class of cards that you just read them and you're not even going to test them because they're just completely not fun to play with, completely overwhelming. Spirit Mirror comes to mind as one of those. Two white, white for an enchantment. It has some upkeep text, but the main thing is zero, destroy target reflection.
Oh,
So just a forever plague wind on the battlefield until your opponent can answer that. Doesn't seem like the best time. There's lots of cards that I have included that I have cut. The main reason that I cut things from this is because I get tired of winning with them. If I'm not having fun with winning with a card, then I think that's a good sign that it's just not leading to fun gameplay. And I've moved those to, I have another version of this cube, Changeling Cube, busted version. I include all of those cards that I've cut for power level. I haven't actually built that. It's kind of a side project that I've thought about maybe maintaining. It started off as the idea that I could have like 10 or 15 cards that I could shuffle into the main cube if we ever wanted to spice it up a little bit or have a higher power level experience every now and then. But now it's like about 100 cards different than the main list that I'm running. So it seems like it's morphing into its own entity entirely. I'm not actually sure if I'll ever put that together or what I'll do with it, but it can be a helpful tool for me to just reference, okay, here's what I'm currently playing with. Here's what I think it would look like if I was trying to push it to the absolute maximum power level, which isn't necessarily what I'm trying to do anymore.
So my cube is like the pauper peasant version of Changeling Cube. This is the legacy cube, and that would be like the supercharged vintage cube.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Although I will note that in your list, you have one of the what I consider vintage cube cards of this format, which is Wirewood Symbiote.
Oh yeah.
Although I have looked through your list a little bit, I think you've done a good job of making that more fair. There's nothing I think that taps to add more than one mana to make that an infinite mana combo, and just being less combo focused in general. That might actually be reasonable in your queue.
I've only drafted the cube once or twice so far, so it's definitely one of my newest projects. I definitely want to draft it more, but I definitely could see drafting this cube and having a lot of cards that I just realized are just completely broken or just don't even really work. Like there was one card I wanted to talk about that I had in my cube because I didn't even realize what it really did until I read it like three more times and realized, wow, this card is horrible for the environment. And that was Dormant Sliver, which is two green blue. All slivers have defender. And whenever this creature comes into play, draw a card. It's literally just moat. It ends the game if it can't be killed. No creatures can attack anymore. Everyone draws their whole deck. It just makes a stalemate. And I didn't realize because this cube has such an interesting restriction on it and game modification that some cards just completely break and are actually not even playable. Are there any cards like that that you've noticed for your version?
Nothing that ever made it in. One kind of close one that I'll talk about is Kargan Intimidator. One in a red for a 3/1 with everybody's favorite line of rule text. Cowards can't block warriors.
Yep.
And then can also turn something into a coward if you pay one mana. You can do that once a turn. This was in the cube initially because in the very early versions of this cube, when it was just me and my brother testing, we would do heads up drafts. We were both trying to do silly combo things. And the way we draft is by setting up a full pod of 24 packs for 8 players, 3 packs of 15, and we would just do random picks for the other players who weren't there. So that means cards were going later than they reasonably should. It was being drafted by two people who knew what to look for, knew all the interactions. So we would just end up with the most busted combo decks possible. So in that environment, aggro could use all the help we could get, basically. So this was a sort of reasonable inclusion at that point. As we've gone on and played with more players, aggro has been a little bit stronger than it has been in past, and combo's been a bit weaker. So I've been dialing back the strength of aggro to make room for combo. So I cut this card for one part to make blocking possible and make it better. But it just also led to a lot of weird gameplay. This was the only card in the cube at that time that could remove creature types. That wasn't ever something I wanted to be a big part of the cube, but I was really enamored with the cowards can't block warriors part. But people would just constantly forget about that impacted their own creatures as well. It just removed blocking in general for both sides. So it removed a lot of agency. It was hard to play around, and making something lose creature types was not what I was trying to promote. So that ended up getting cut.
That's really interesting that it actually kind of turned off the emblem of the cube, being able to remove the creature types from the creatures. In some ways, that's really interesting, but I could see that creating some really strange rules problems.
Yeah, another thing that it did was it created corner cases where you would discourage you from doing the fun thing. And I'll give one brief example of Secluded Courtyard, which is a land. When it enters, you name a creature type, and then you can use that land for any color if you're casting a creature of that type or using it for an ability. So there were very weird corner cases where if you wanted to spend that mana on an activated ability at sorcery speed, but your opponent could on upkeep make your thing not that creature type, so you wouldn't be able to use that mana. The correct card to name with Secluded Courtyard, or the correct creature type to name with Secluded Courtyard, was Coward, because it was the only mechanically relevant creature type. But I really like having Secluded Courtyard and having people name whatever they want. It's just a nice moment where someone plays Secluded Courtyard, you just pause the game, say, okay, name a creature type.
Yup.
I understand that this doesn't have any strategic impact on anything in this game, but the game requires you to name a creature type.
Yup. I would just name like tomato or something that just makes no sense.
Nope, that's not on the list.
Shoot.
For reference, in the overview, I do have a list of all of the different creature types. It's not updated. It's updated as of February of this year. I don't see tomato yet. Is that a Final Fantasy creature type?
It'll be in a secret lair or something eventually. And one thing that's really interesting looking at this list is it actually reminds me in some ways about my friend Sam from episode 1 of the podcast, talking about his Circle of Life cube that gives all creatures a merge, and talking about what is the power level that he should maintain for the non-creature spells. Because when all creatures have a merge, it really powers up and makes really interesting gameplay for the creatures. But in some ways, the non-creatures almost get left behind in that environment because it's like, okay, well, the non-creatures don't have this huge buff or interesting change. So what do I do with the non-creatures? And I was actually curious about that for this cube because there are non-creatures that do become really interesting and really cool when you have the changeling mechanic. Like, for example, I love Wizard's Lightning, which is 2 in a red, deal 3 to any target. It's a lightning bolt, but it costs 2 less if you control a wizard. But then at the same time, I see like non-creature spells that are pretty normal magic cards in here, like Bone Shards. 1 black sorcery as additional cost to cast it, sacrifice a creature, discard a card, destroy a creature, a planeswalker. Tell me about the power level of the non-creatures in here. Like, I don't see Swords to Plowshares, or I don't see Lightning Bolt, or I don't see Reanimate. But then I see really strong ones like Thoughtseize. Tell me about how you've chosen to put non-creatures in here.
So the decisions in here are basically very mechanically focused. I'm trying to have them interact at the correct rate or the rate that I want them to with the creatures. Interaction in particular is already at a premium in this cube because I want this cube to be about assembling an engine, assembling multiple pieces together. So being able to disrupt that, even if it is just a shock, is still going to be very, very strong. The cube is pretty low curving just because the cards that I was interested in lend itself to that. I like being able to play lots of spells and giving players that sort of agency. And things like Wizard's Lightning play into that. It costs 3 on its face, but it's going to cost 1 after you play a creature. But it forces that sequencing of you have to develop first. You can't just immediately bolt your opponent's turn 1 play with that card. I like that sort of style of effect. That's also on Fairy Fencing in black has a similar thing going on. So something like Swords to Plowshares is just exceedingly efficient, being able to hit anything. It removes something from the game, which if you're removing a combo piece, that's a huge blow to a combo deck, which I want to support. So there are exile effects, but they'll be temporary or you'll pay a little bit more for them. But just, yeah, 1 mana, unconditional exile and not give you anything in return, basically, is not the type of interaction I want in here. I have run Path to Exile. I'm trying cutting it for now. It could go back in, but if there was going to be a 1 mana instant speed exile anything effect, it would be Path instead of Swords. So the interaction is kind of, yeah, defined by I need to give players the tools to interact, but I don't want that to be the best thing. I don't want to incentivize players to only draft the interaction and then eventually card advantage to just win a long, boring, grindy game where the opponent doesn't get to do anything. I want players to work for it a little bit more, have to trade down on mana a little bit. Some part of it is also enabling your strategies, like with Bone Shard. There are graveyard decks that care about getting things in your graveyard, or the cards will make a lot of tokens where you won't care about sacrificing something. So making players work for the removal in some cases is also something that I like having in here.
That makes a lot of sense. And one thing that's definitely true about this cube, and it was a big reason that I wanted to build my version also, is I love cubes that just let me throw in a ton of cards that people don't recognize and don't have a lot of staples. So people go into it and it's like a whole new world of a cube. And it's like a lot of cards that people haven't even seen before. Was that also a big part of this cube for you and not including as many cube staples?
Yeah, that was certainly a part. It also initially started as kind of a budget project. Part of the reasoning behind that would be that because I'm caring about cards in this entirely different context, they might cost a lot less. It lowers the kind of investment the cost of trying to try out this new idea. So if I build it and it ends up not working out, then it doesn't really set me back anything. But I also do like having the novelty of a bunch of different cards that don't make sense elsewhere. And then people open up a pack and see them and translate them in their head. And the light bulb clicks and saying, oh, this is how this is going to work in this cube. And this is the type of things and rates I can expect for cards in this cube. There's always a lot of smiling, a lot of giggling during someone's first draft as they get accustomed to the environment.
I love moments like that when somebody sees like more or less in the pack, which is one blue, add or subtract one or one, the number or the word from a number or number word on target spell or permanent until end of turn. And I love the flavor text. Why was 5 afraid of 6? Because 6, 7, 8.
This is one of my favorite Magic cards in general. This is exactly a blue card. Like blue would do this if it could. You can't do it in black border because in tournament Magic, each card needs to play the same regardless of the actual printed words on it. So the Oracle text is what rules, not what's actually typed onto the card. In this, in silver border world, you look at what's actually typed onto the card. But cheap interaction, blue doesn't get the opportunity to remove things from the battlefield at an efficient rate very often. So more or less can be a quick kill spell, but this is a combo cube, and this also has some combos with some other creatures in here. So
Oh, yeah.
it can kind of play double duty.
That's really cool. Like it's basically a gut shot. It kills 2 ones.
Yeah.
Really
Or
cool.
it can make your devoted druid get -1, -0 counters.
Oh, wow. Now that's a card that I would have to play with like 10 times before I realize what it did. That's really cool. And another thing that's interesting about this cube is I don't see many board wipes at all. Like I was looking through it, I see Slaughter the Strong, which is 1 white white. Each player chooses any number of creatures he or she controls with total power 4 less and sacrifices all of the creatures he or she controls. But I really didn't see many other board wipes. Tell me, do you purposely not include many board wipes?
Yeah, there's been like maybe one board wipe since the very beginning of the cube. There was originally Tividar's Crusade, just 1 white white, destroy all goblins.
Yep.
There's Massacre Worm that does a kind of Plague Wind in some boards. There's one other card, Knight Incarnate, that can evoke and give all creatures -3/-3 when it leaves the battlefield for 3 and a black. But in general, I want creatures to stick around. I want players to play to the board, and I want players to put together multiple creatures that get better with other creatures. So I don't want to punish them for doing that. At the same time, there should be some safety valves in some cases. So that's why Slaughter the Strong is my White Wrath that I'm trying out in here. A combo deck can live through that sort of thing. They might have to, in some cases, sacrifice one of their combo pieces, but they can have multiple things still in play. But that can mainly do a good job of helping combat a wide board when they have 2 Lord effects in play.
That makes a
So
lot of sense. It's not really like a full board wipe, more just let's calm down a little bit.
yes, exactly.
And tell me about the archetypes in this cube. Like I saw in the outline that there's Reanimator, there's like creature spam tokens. Of course, there's a lot of combo. Is there no control deck in this cube? And is that on purpose?
There can be control. You just draft removal spells and value creatures for the most part. There are cards that can do a good job of catching you up, but those can often still play like combo decks. Like one of the biggest catch-up cards in here is Angel of Glory's Rise, which is a 7-drop that when it enters, you exile all zombies and then return all humans from your graveyard to the battlefield. So that's something that if you can cheat it into play or even just get it to 7 mana, can kind of reset a board. But you don't really want to cheat it into play too early because you want your opponent to develop more as one thing. And then you also want to be doing something with the part that returns creatures to your battlefield. So it can also require setup as well. So a lot of the cheaty targets, a lot of the expensive cards aren't the type of thing like an Archon of Cruelty, where you just try to get that in play as quickly as possible, regardless of any context. A lot of them require some setup, some other context that makes them work. Like one of my favorites is Slith Mizzet.
Yep.
It is the 2 blue, blue, red, red. It's a playtest card version of Niv Mizzet, one of the Niv Mizzets that gives all of the slivers you control flying. And whenever you draw a card, this creature deals 1 damage to any target and tap draw a card. So if you get that in play really quickly, but you don't have a board to go with it. It doesn't do anything on its own right away, and you open it yourself up to have the card be answered. So it's asking you to do something. It's asking you to have a board before you get it into play. And that sort of condition is something that I try to have in my bigger targets.
Both of these cards are awesome. Like, what does the
They have
equation mean on Sliv Mizzet?
something to do if you rotate them certain degrees, like there's 180 degrees and there's 90 degrees. So if you turn those things a certain way and look at them, they're supposed to spell out something. So I think, yeah, it's supposed to say like Sliv Miz when you rotate it the proper way, I'm pretty sure.
I gotta do that now. I'm gonna have to turn my monitor a million ways after we're done recording.
Another
And
great benefit of the playtest cards, I include one other one in here, or two other ones in here, actually. But they're so cartoony and they're so just, you don't take yourself seriously when you're reading this sort of card. And that's a vibe I like to cultivate in this cube. Like you can approach it from a very technical perspective, but this is Changeling Cube. These cards are weird. Don't worry about it. Have fun with it.
yeah, looking at Angel of Glory's Rise, I just realized I think it's really funny that it exiles all zombies. So it exiles itself as part of the resolution.
Yep, yep. One of my
That's
favorite
cool.
things to do with it, though, is to have a stack outlet with it. So if you sacrifice it with that trigger on the stack, then it will bring itself back,
Oh
and then
my
you
gosh.
can do loops with it. It's not the strongest thing because it does require a lot,
Oh, if you have
but
like
it's one
carrion
of my favorite
feeder
things.
and then like sack the carrion feeder to itself and that. And
Yeah, you
oh,
stack your board, you bring your whole board back. You need something to get that rolling, but there are some fun kills with that.
that is awesome. Oh my gosh. I could just look at this list for hours and just find crazy, insane things. I can really see the care that you put into it. And one interesting thing that I noticed when I was designing my version of the cube is that it's definitely possible to include what I would call like traditional archetypes. Like we talked about, like having reanimator, graveyard decks, and then still have like the changeling theme. And many specific individual creature types often focus on specific strategies. Like zombie decks often have a graveyard or aristocrats theme, or fairies have a flash speed theme, or elves go wide. Do you notice when people are building their decks and drafting that just because certain creature types tend to go together really well with themselves, that you'll see a deck that just has like 15 zombies in it because that just makes sense for the kindred synergies of the zombies tribe?
That can happen. I'll find most decks are still using the emblem. Green is the biggest kind of thing at risk for that, just because there's so many elves and they're doing elf things. So they're going to sometimes play similarly, but it still opens up for branching into other colors. Like you're not going to find many red or white elves, but you can still play a green white or a green red deck and have it work with the cards that you're drafting. So that's not something I'm paying much attention to in terms of monitoring the creature types of what I'm including. But yeah, that can happen where you can glance at a deck list and say, if you didn't notice from this cube, say, oh, I like this elf package, but what's this pack rat doing here? This doesn't make sense to me. No, pack
Yeah.
rat's a bad example because pack rats are just a traditional limited card.
And when you're building the cube and you're picking cards for it, do you include cards or creatures agnostic to what the creature type is on them? Or do you in some ways pay attention to the original creature type that's on the card just because it might help you in your own cube design kind of keep track of the synergies?
No, I don't think I look at the creature type very much. That's the main rules text or the main part of the card that I'm able to skip over.
Makes
I'm
sense.
more focused on just, yeah, I guess as I mentioned before, I'm not as focused on trying to signal necessarily to new players what's going on. There's enough there that they'll be able to put something functional together just by drafting cards within a color pair, basically. Outside of that, the broader focus for me is how does this fit mechanically with what else is in the cube? Does it enable something cool? Is it going to be applying too much pressure too quickly? Those are the sorts of questions I'm asking.
That makes a lot of sense. And tell me about the cards you've chosen to duplicate for this cube. Like there's four that are written on the cube cover page. Champion the Parish, which is one white for a 1/1 whenever another human enters, put a 1/1 counter on it. Also, Worthy Knight, which is one and a white for a 2/2 whenever you cast a night spell, create a 1/1 human. And Spell Stutter Strike, which is one and a blue for a 1/1 flash flying. When it enters, counter target spell with converted mana cost X or less, or X number of fairies you control. And then lastly, Elvish Warmaster, which is 1 green, 2/2. Whenever one or more elves enter the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 elf warrior once a turn. You can also pay 7, give your elves +2/+2 and death touch. Tell me why you decided to duplicate cards in general and then why these cards.
So looking at the cube from the outset, there's two things going on. One, which I'm not sure if we actually have defined actually in this episode, but there's the emblem of all creatures of all creature types in all zones. So we're already modifying kind of the rules of the game. We are making people translate what these cards do in their printed form, basically to apply to all creatures. And the second thing I'm doing is trying to add in a bunch of combos, trying to put in interactions that make these cards pop off. So those two things taken together, that's already my entire complexity budget. So anything I can do to reduce the complexity from there can help players out a little bit. Breaking Singleton is one thing that helps with that. I also break Singleton for some lands. So that's part of the reason for Champion of the Parish. There's another card that could do that. There's Hada Free Blade, which is actually the card I used to run before it. But observing people play that when this cube was on coverage at CubeCon, they would often miss the trigger. It's formatted a little bit differently. That one is a 0/1, and whenever it or another ally enters, it gets a counter, instead of champion being a 1/1 that whenever another human enters, it gets a counter. So missing that first trigger was throwing people off sometimes. So I just decided to make it champion of the parish instead. And also the second toughness enters as a 1/2 basically, instead of a 1/1 for champion. So that extra toughness makes it a better attacker. So champion helps me dial back aggro slightly. So if I'm going to have this sort of effect, and if I want two of these effects, or two copies of a card that do this effect, it makes more sense just to have two copies of one of them instead of one copy of Hada Freeblade and one copy of Champion. Less cards that people need to keep track of. You can say, oh, I've already seen this card. I know what this does. One less thing to worry about. Similar thing with Worthy Knight and Elvish War Master, except these ones are adding creatures to the battlefield, and this cube likes to have lots of bodies. So
Yeah.
anything that can make multiple bodies is going to be helpful. Elvish War Master, especially being a cheap card that is also a mana sink. So there's some infinite mana combos. I don't want to have too many only expensive things that only end up in the super ramp deck or the infinite mana combo deck. So having things that are cheap that other decks still want, but do also have this additional modality is something I like having. And then Spellstutter Sprite is just so cool. It's
Yeah.
it's just such a great magic card, and it feels so good playing and countering a spell where you have humans and elves next to it that don't have to be fairies. It's one of my favorite cards in here, and I toyed with the idea of dialing back the Breaking Singleton, but Spellstutter Sprite would just be that's irreplaceable. There's nothing that could slot into that second Spellstutter Sprite slot.
Oh yeah. Nothing feels better than when you're playing Popper and you spell Stutter Strike like their Ponder or something, and then the game's over because they only have like a 17 land deck.
The blue deck in here, or a blue deck in here, is kind of a tempo deck. There's a few ninjas that you can rebuy your Spellstutter Sprite in here with, and it's not as popular with other people, but I really enjoy playing that deck in here.
Yeah. I love ninjas. Ninjas are so fun. I have a ninja sub theme in my peasant cube. It's so fun. And one question that I have for you that I wrestle a lot with the design of my version of this cube, but also just a lot of my other cubes in general, is knowing when to include cards that don't completely lean into the theme of the cube. Like this cube includes a lot of cards that don't directly say, oh, if you have another spirit, or oh, if you have another zombie, or oh, if you have another elf. It includes a lot of cards that are just like good cards, but don't directly scream, hey, this works with the theme. Like, for example, Vengeful Bloodlich, which is 1 and a black for a 1/1. Whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, target opponent loses 1, you gain 1. I mean, it's a blood artist. It works great, but it doesn't say like whenever another vampire dies, something happens. Tell me about when you decide to include cards that directly scream the theme or cards that are just like good cards regardless of the theme.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I keep my eye on. So when I was first developing this cube, it originally had a lot more of those screaming the theme type of cards. So a lot more cards that cared directly about creature type. As I played more with it, I got a better understanding of what I was missing, what effects would be good in here. So I just kind of kept adding more of those over time. I do keep an eye on the number of creatures that directly care about creature types. And for the past year or so, it's been between about 50 and 55%. I think it's currently at 52%. I still feel like at the pack level and at the deck level and at the game level is more of what I'm paying attention to for this. Is if you look at a pack, does this feel like Changeling Cube? If you're playing a game, does the emblem matter? Then that's the main thing I'm focusing on rather than individual cards. So something like the Vengeful Blood Witch is an important part of the cube just because it's a payoff for putting together a sacrifice loop. One of the first kind of ones I thought about was when I was first breaking into more of these generic cards was Seasoned Pyromancer, which at the time was a little bit more of a popular card, has fallen out of favor a little bit since due to recent power creep and all that. But when it enters, you can discard 2 cards and draw 2 cards. This cube cares about putting stuff into the graveyard. For each non-land you discard, you get to make a 1/1. This cube cares about going wide and it rewards you for it. That ability tied up into a 3/3, it doesn't explicitly say, I care about creature types, but it does play well with what I'm trying to do. That's the sort of card that makes its way into this cube, regardless of whether or not it actually cares about the creature type line.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's something that I just have a lot of trouble with my own design. Like I said, I just feel like sometimes I focus in and narrow in so much on like the exact theme that I'm going for that something like you said, a Seasoned Pyromancer, which could just be perfect because it's a discard outlet. It makes 1/1s. It's a graveyard card. It doesn't directly say Changeling. When I'm thinking of cards to put in the cube, that's something that I wouldn't even think about. So I think that's something that I need to do more. And I think probably a lot of designers could learn from. I think that's a great lesson.
I'll push back on that. I think recognizing the option is the important part. If you want to stick with more of a theme, if you want this cube to be about, okay, here's a bunch of cards that care about creature types and let's reevaluate them in this context, I think it's perfectly valid to kind of restrict yourself on what you're putting in there. But my goals lately have been just more about the gameplay, about letting people do the combos. And if this card will facilitate that, even if it's not directly referencing the rules change of the cube, then for me, it makes sense. I don't think that you need to do it one way or the other. I think recognizing that there's a conscious choice here is the main thing. And then whichever way you take that is going to be up to you and it's going to work out either way.
Yeah, I mean, my version of the cube, I think like literally every card in some way has to do with some creature type. So I'm not following my own lesson.
Definitely cubes in my local play group where it is very loudly about the bit.
Yep.
And those can be great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Tim, let's jump into a pack one, pick one here. I'll read it off. We have Bamboozling Beeble, which is a blue for a 1/1 protection from robots. And the next time target player would roll one more dice this turn, instead they roll that many dice plus 1, and you choose one of those rolls to ignore. You can pay 1 and tap it to do that. How many cards in the cube care about rolling dice, or is this just a 1/1 with protection from robots?
1/1 protection from robots. Yeah, that's all it needs to be. There are some cards in here that have a bit of trinket text on there. This is the most egregious trinket text because it's like 4 lines, and it literally there's one reason that I think it can mechanically matter is there's Deep Root Pilgrimage that cares about when you tap something, it makes a 1/1 merfolk. But other than that, this is just a 1/1 protection from creatures, basically.
You know, I actually kind of love that, having text that 99.9% of the time means nothing. But when players can say, oh my gosh, this matters here, that's such a sick moment. And then we have Cut Down, 1 black. Destroy target creature with total power and toughness 5 or less. Then we have Elvish Archdruid, 1 green, 2/2. Other elf creatures you control get +1/+1. And then you can tap it to add a green to your mana pool for each elf you control. I have a lot of nostalgia for this card. One of the first decks I ever built when I was first getting into Magic as a kid was this basically just whatever elves I had lying around, and I tried to bring it to a standard event, and the deck was like so far out of standard that they basically told me, what are you doing? But I was like 12. But this card is so good, especially in here. It's a Lord and it's a mana dork, so it works with a lot of infinites, I bet. And then we have Heap Doll, which is 1 colorless. And you can sacrifice Heap Doll to exile a target card from a graveyard. It's a 1/1. I mean, that's great. It's a colorless creature that can be graveyard hate. And then we have Mausoleum Wanderer, blue for a 1/1 flying. Whenever another spirit enters under your control, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And you can sack it to counter an instant sorcery unless they pay X, where X is its power. This card's great because it leans, I feel like, into the spirits. It feels like this could have also been a fairy. It feels perfect for a fairy deck. And then we have Three Tree City, which is, I bet, really sweet in this cube. When it enters, choose a creature type. So, of course, you name tomato, but you can't. And you can tap it for colorless, pay 2 and tap it, choose a color, add an amount of mana of that color equal to the number of creatures you control of the chosen type. Then we have Bramblewood Paragon, 1 and a green for a 2/2. Each other warrior creature you control comes to play with an additional 1/1 counter on it, and each creature you control with a 1/1 counter has trample. That card seems good. We have Careful Study, blue sorcery, draw 2, discard 2. Tishana's Tiebinder, 2 and a blue, 3/2 flash. When it enters, counter target activate or trigger ability. And if an ability of an artifact creature or planeswalker is countered this way, it loses all abilities for as long as Tishana's Tiebinder is on the battlefield. We have Desmond Miles. This card is so funny. Assassin's Creed, 1 and a black for a 1/3 menace. It gets +1/+0 for each other assassin you control and each assassin in your grave. And when it deals combat damage to a player, severe X, where X the amount of damage it dealt. Temple Garden, green, white shock. Xenagos the Reveler, planeswalker, 2 red, green, 3 loyalty, and +1 to get a combination of red or green, number of creature control. You can get a 2/2 green and red satyr. Or you can pay 6 and exile the top 7 cards of your library, and you may put any number of creatures and land cards among them on the battlefield. We got Kogla the Titan Ape, 3 green, green, green. When it enters, fight something. And when it attacks, you destroy an artifact or enchantment. And then actually the 1 and a green return target human you control to its owner's hand. It gets indestructible. I bet that has infinites in here, right? I bet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you have infinite mana, you can just recur itself over and over again. That's one of my favorite things.
Oh, yeah. But would this go infinite with like a Peregrine Drake or something? Is that in this cube?
Peregrine Drake is not.
Okay. But that's cool. That card is
That could
fun.
be a thing, though.
And then we have Ancient Amphitheater. It's a red-white land that if you reveal a giant, it enters untapped, which is great. And then finally, we have Flood Pit's Drowner, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 flash vigilance. When it enters, tap something, put a stone counter on it, and then you can pay 1 and a blue and shuffle it and the creature with the stone counter into its owner's library. Very interesting card. So what do you think of this pack? I think it's pretty cool.
So there's a few different directions you could go with this. So there's 5 blue cards in here, and 4 of them kind of play into this kind of blue tempo deck space. So taking one of those and trying to wheel something could be a way to set you up into a blue deck. Bramblewood Paragon is a persist enabler in that it puts counters on creatures when they enter. So if you have a persist creature that is entering with a -1 counter, and you have Bramblewood Paragon at the same time, it'll enter with no counters. So you'll be able to keep on sacrificing it as much times as you want. That's a direction you could go into. It's also just a perfectly fine generic creature in a deck that's just trying to attack. Desmond Miles is impressive. I don't like that it's a Universes Beyond card, but it fits really well in terms of what it does in the cube. That's something that I'm a fan of. There's Kogla, the Titan Ape, which is one of my favorite kind of cheap targets, and it can do some very cool things with that ability to rebuy humans. But from this pack, I'm leaning Cut Down. Generally, in this cube, I'm first trying to pick premium direction for a combo deck, and then after that, premium removal, which I'm just going to say is cheap removal, and then maybe something that can deal with anything. But Cut Down, just 1 mana instant speed. It kills so much of the cube, and you do need to prioritize your removal spells in here. So this doesn't seem like the strongest pack to me, but I'm fine first picking a Cut Down from this pack. What are you
That's
thinking?
a really interesting take, that the Cut Down. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Like we were talking about before, when the creatures are so powered up, just having really efficient interaction, I think, is really strong. So Cut Down is a great pick, but I'm also looking at Tishana's Tiebinder. I just love that card. It's so fun getting people with it.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of opportunities to get people with it. There's lots of activated abilities, lots of triggered abilities, definitely.
But my blink brain says Kogla. I mean, you can keep returning things to your hand and play them over and over. You can keep returning your Ravenous Chupacabra, Slayer of the Wicked, 3 and a white, when it enters, destroy a vampire, werewolf, or zombie, and just keep playing that over and over again and keep killing their stuff. And then you can bring Kogla back to your hand if they try and kill it, because it says a human you control. This card's awesome.
Yeah, Kogla is certainly defensible. Yeah.
So I think I'm going to be on Tishana's Tiebinder. Very cool. And Tim, thank you so much for coming on the show. I forgot to say it at the beginning of the episode, though. If you happen to be in the area of Games IRL or Avon, Connecticut, we're always looking for more Cube people. Anything you want to say before we wrap up here?
If you're in the St. Louis area and you want a cube, feel free to reach out to me on Discord. The safest way of figuring out what my Discord name is, because that might end up changing, would be going to the NTG Cube Talk Discord, and in the Find Players or Find Play group IRL threads, there's threads for each state, and I've posted in the one for Missouri. So I'm in St. Louis. So if you're in that area, you can look me up there and we can try to play Cube together.
Are you going to take down CubeCon this year?
Almost certainly not. I will be attending, but I'm just planning on playing casually, same as before. The impression that I am somehow good at Magic because I won CubeCon is, I think, overstated.
I mean, that's impressive.
It's winning CubeCon was very much something that happened to me. It was not something I set out for. It was not something that I feel like I accomplished through grit and determination. It was me showing up because I wanted to play some Magic, and then eventually they handed me the trophy.
You won by accident.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Tim, for coming on, and thank you all for listening. Please like, subscribe, follow. I appreciate it, and we'll see you all next week for some more Cube, and have a great day.